Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine Avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Let us begin today to talk about this very interesting aspect of Sri Ramakrishna. Tales and parables of Sri Ramakrishna. These are got from the Gospel, which is a recording of his conversations over a period of a few years. Whenever Sri Ramakrishna was explaining some very difficult philosophic concept, he would take the help of stories. As we all know, stories are something which interests everybody. A small child loves hearing stories. As we grow up, when we talk to each other, we share our own experiences, which are also narratives like stories. Others listen to us when we speak about our own experiences. For entertainment, once we are grown up, we read books, which are again stories. We watch movies, again they are stories, or television serials, or short films. These are all stories. We hear the lives of great people, their biographies. These are also stories. So we can imagine how the concept of a story is so important. Great teachers all over the world, a great spiritual teacher like Lord Jesus Christ, also has used parables. These are stories which are very simple. The story is simple, but it has a deep meaning, usually a deep spiritual meaning or a deep value, something which we can learn from it. So when we talk about a parable, we have to remember that the parable is very small, it is very brief. We can explain it, expand it. What Sri Ramakrishna tells us in a few sentences, we can write a whole book on it. That is how meaningful the parables are. We also can understand that from the parable, we can derive many examples of what is good behavior and what is not, what we should do and what we should not. Just now, when we recited Sthapakaya cha dharmasya, then what did we do? He is the establisher of what is right. He establishes the right path. He shows us the right direction. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya. So when we describe Sri Ramakrishna in these words, we know that by listening to his words, by listening to his ideas, we can take the proper direction in our life. That is what the parables are. These parables were used to illustrate certain points during his conversation. As I mentioned, the gospel contains these conversations. They were recorded by a wonderful person, Mahendranath Gupta. He was a great headmaster. He was a brilliant scholar and also a great teacher. Because of his intellectual sharpness, he was given the role of noting down. Even the great disciple Swami Vivekananda said that you can do this job better. I can't do it. Swamiji gave the job of writing Sri Ramakrishna's life to Swami Sharadanandaji. He says, you can write the life better. I can speak about his teachings. I can make him famous all over the world. But each of you has a role and fulfill the role. So, Sri Mahendranath Gupta ji, who was a great disciple, wrote the gospel. And the gospel is the exact replica of these conversations. Whenever they would meet in Sri Ramakrishna's room in Dakshineshwar, or sometimes during travel elsewhere, these conversations he would record, he would meditate, and he would write. So he found that very often Sri Ramakrishna was telling very interesting stories. And the stories also became a part of the gospel conversations. Lifting these stories out of the gospel, bringing it for our reading. Suppose you don't feel like reading the 1,000-page book, which is the gospel. You can take the small book, and that is the Tales and Parables of Sri Ramakrishna. I find that it is available online. I find that link is there where the stories are there. So everybody can read. Now, reading is one level, but following, practicing is another level. We take the ideas to heart. So I thought that with the blessings of Swami Sri Kantanandaji, we can have a series where we talk about two things of the parables. One of the things in the parable is that although the conversation was in Bengali, that was Sri Ramakrishna's mother tongue, the Kathamrita, as the gospel is called in its Bengali title, the Kathamrita is written in Bengali, but what we have in our hand is the translation. This translation was the one which the Westerners could read. Swami Nikhilananda made the translation for the benefit of those people who could not read Bengali. I remember a group of devotees in Hyderabad Ramakrishna Mutt would learn Bengali in their old age, most of them 60s, 70s, etc. 80 also, I think, who wanted to read the gospel in its original, in the Kathamrita form. Nowadays, translations are available in all Indian languages, in many foreign languages also, because one feels happy to read it in their own language. So the language is also very important. If you read the gospel in Marathi, if you read it in Hindi, if you read it in Tamil or Telugu or Urdu, I don't know whether Urdu is also there, but all these languages, you feel a kind of closeness because the language makes a lot of difference. Since, in the self-improvement program, many questions came to me, many, mails came saying that they are interested in the language also. So I thought that when we are talking about the parable, the parable will have two aspects. One aspect is the parable in its language, not original language of Sri Ramakrishna, but the language which all of us are eager to learn because it has become a global language, that is English. So we use the parables to learn the language. I remember once, I think it was in a small place called Nalgonda, there was a workshop for young people. They were all college students or job aspirants. There were about 2,500 in the audience. They said, you speak to them about English. I showed them this book from the stage. I said, see this book. I told them the name, Tales and Parables of Sri Ramakrishna. I repeated the name many times. And also I told them that they could read it to learn English. I showed them how they could learn it by doing one little, few sentences, one little story. After that, I must have got at least a few thousand mails saying, please tell us the name of the book. Where can we get the book, etc. Now, if you have initiative, you can easily find a book these days. We have so much, World Wide Web, that finding a book is not difficult. There is a website called archive.org where you will find all the old issues of that journal of Ramakrishna Math called Prabuddha Bharat. You want to read? The journal is more than 125 years old now. You want to read a 100-year-old issue of that journal. You go to archive.org, you download, and you have the journal with you. You don't even have to visit a library. You don't have to do any of those things. So for us, looking at the parables, finding the parables, reading the parables, looking at the structures of English, the vocabulary of English, the pronunciation, the spelling, the punctuation, these become very important. That is one aspect of the parables. The parables are very beautifully translated in excellent language. So our language improvement also gets done. The second aspect is that we talk about how the parable helps us to live a better life. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya. So how is dharma achieved if we follow the roadmap shown in these parables? We look at the parables and we see them. Okay, this is a parable. This is the story of the parable. We enjoy the story. We say, oh, it's a very interesting story. Is that where we are going to end it? No, we need to learn something from it. We shall do many of these parables, as many as there is opportunity. And we will see with each story a new direction, a new aspect of dharma becoming clear. It's much easier to understand through the story. If you tell only a philosophical doctrine, only very intelligent people will understand. People who have a lot of time to think about it will understand. They will think for many years and they will say, oh, this is the meaning. But if you explain that same theory using an entire story like Sri Ramakrishna does in his parables, then the lesson also becomes easy for us. The values become easy, and the story remains in the mind as a guiding light. We are going, the future is complete darkness. We can't see anything in the future. But if we have some light, if the light goes off, we have a torch, then these stories become like torches. In olden days, they would take a lamp or a candle. There's a beautiful story about a person, searching for fire in one of the parables here, where he goes to the neighbor's house to ask, but in his hand, he's holding the lantern. The neighbor says, you fool, there is light with you. Very, very important lessons. Very often we don't realize what greatness we have. Doing what is correct, doing what is wrong, realizing that we are doing it wrong, avoiding it. You find many examples. The fisherwoman doesn't like the smell of flowers. She wants the smell of fish because we are used to what is bad. We hate what is good. We avoid what is good because we have been accustomed to what is bad. The snake who becomes sattvic He says, I don't want to bite anybody. Then the Guru says, don't bite. Don't put your poison into the body of another person. But can't you scare them by making the hissing sound? You can easily scare the people. So you should know how to defend yourself, but you should not harm others in order to do that. Like that, many lessons are there. Everybody sees a chameleon and then they say, what is the color? Everyone starts fighting by saying, the chameleon is blue, it is yellow, it is red, it is orange. Nobody agrees. Everybody has a different opinion. That is how our religions are. But Sri Ramakrishna came, Sarvadharma Swarupine. He is the idol, he is the ultimate perfection of all religions. His roop, his appearance, his behavior, his traits are a conglomeration of all religions. So when we say Sarvadharma Swarupine, then we are saying that every religion is equal. But are we not fighting with each other? All the time saying, my religion is better than your religion. That is terrible. Because you don't believe in my religion, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to hurt you, harm you, kill you. I'm going to stop everything which helps you to live. These are all, foolish things. So instead of saying that, Sri Ramakrishna gives us a story. In this way, the stories are plenty. When we read these stories, we get this dual benefit. Why are parables so popular? Let us see why they are popular. The average individual is confused about life. Especially confusing is spirituality. If you give a lecture about spirituality, the ordinary people will get bored. They will fall asleep. If you give them something entertaining, music or dancing or singing or partying, they are very wide awake. You start giving them a lecture about spirituality or about goodness, about values and ethics. They will say, oh, so boring. Let me sleep for some time. And they fall asleep without realizing. So the parable is that story which brings the interest. It captures the attention. It focuses the mind of the person who wants to become better, who wants to go in the right direction by not telling, do what is good, don't do what is bad. Such precepts, very difficult to follow. But if you show in a story how to do good, how to avoid what is not good, then it remains permanently. It changes a person. This kind of a change Sri Ramakrishna realized because once he was asked, Sri Ramakrishna, what books have you read, Master? Can you tell us the names of the books you have read? He says, oh, I have not read much. I used to hear stories when I was a small child. Sadhus would come. Sadhus would tell stories. They would discuss many points. They would have discussions amongst themselves. I would sit with them and I would listen. And by listening, I got all these ideas. Of course, he was a brilliant mind. If he listened to one small seed, he could make it into a huge tree because in his mind, the fertile mind, that small seed of a story would become a huge tree where he could give an explanation. So in these conversations, when he's giving an explanation, he tells a small story to make all of us remember what is right. And then he gives an explanation sometimes. So one part is the story, The other part is the meaning of the story, the interpretation of the story. He says, this is the reason why I told you the story. Like this, people behave. People do not behave in the proper way. These are the mistakes that people make in their behavior. So the story is able to tell you that. Why we would like to have these parables with us, why we are interested in the parables of Sri Ramakrishna, is because Sri Ramakrishna gives a wide range of ideas. He does not say only one method is correct. I have used, I'm sure, earlier the word inclusivism, inclusivist, inclusivistic. We can say, nothing is considered as bad. If you make a mistake, the mistake is not bad. The mistake is a step which you have to step on it to go on to a better situation. So we should never feel, we should never think that by making a mistake, we have finished our life. No. The more mistakes we make, the more steps we climb. If each mistake is one step, we climb. Next, we make another mistake, we climb. So we go on climbing. We are going towards betterment. We are going towards a life which has direction. Usually, our life is very directionless. Especially the pandemic has shown us that whatever direction we had in life, a young student who wants to study further, a brilliant student who wants to write an actual exam and not get passing marks only without an exam, a person who's searching for a job and is waiting for a job interview, a person who's used to working from office has to work from home. Like that, at every level, we have realized that the pandemic has shown us that whatever we are depending on is sometimes not dependable. It is not stable. It doesn't stay in one place. So where do we find stability? We find stability in some methods. The methods are given in the parables. So if we take the method from the story and put it in our own life, we change the method in such a way that it suits us. Then we are making the best use of the parable. Suppose, like the monks were supposed to go for begging. The food which is got by begging was considered to be pure food. But they would not get cooked food, they would get some rice. So they could prepare with it anything. They could prepare a soft rice, they could prepare rice with vegetables, they could prepare rice with dal, which we call khichdi. They could prepare anything. This raw material was given. So the parables are like that raw material. What we make of it depends on the parable giving us the right message. The parable given to somebody who's not able to follow or understand is a waste of time. That parable becomes waste because no benefit comes out of it. The parable is heard. You enjoyed the story, but nothing happened after that. Then what happens if a person takes this parable to heart, looks at it from different perspectives? The parable is so small, but we can look at it from all the sides. Then we understand that it has so many designs. I don't know if in your childhood you had it, but in our childhood we had. It used to be a long thing with small pieces of glass inside, all colorful. You turned it, the picture of the glass would change. Again, you turn it, picture of the glass would change. It was called kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope was a toy which we used to enjoy because every time you turned it, you saw a new design. So that is how the parables are. The parables are like the kaleidoscope. They have multiple meanings. Each one of us might live by the parable, taking from it a different meaning or more than one meaning, different meanings at different times. Today, one parable has one meaning. 5 years later, that same parable gives a different direction to our life. It puts us in the correct path. It gives us some energy to follow in the direction which will lead us somewhere. So that is why the parables are important. But if we only learn that the parables will help us better, then we are not doing justice to this beautiful book. You know, the book is so wonderful. And as an English teacher, I feel that it is a great resource for learning language, because this is a translated version. It's not original what Sri Ramakrishna said, but it's a beautifully translated version. And therefore, we can look at the language, we can look at the ideas in addition to the language, remembering always that to improve a language, listening and reading are most important. Listening and reading. So, listening, as I speak or as I read out the story, listening, you are listening. Otherwise, you are reading the story. Once you get this book, you know, it's a small book, you can see, you know, it has about 270 pages, not much. One page per day, one story per day. So for the next 1 year almost, nothing more to read. We are reading this. We are practicing, we are imbibing, we are learning twofold. You know, that is why two advantages which I wanted to explore greatly. The two advantages. I feel very happy that revered Swami Sri Kantanandaji is giving us these opportunities. It's a great opportunity because here we are learning not only the meaning of the parable, not only the value of the parable, not only the use of the parable in daily life, but we are also learning a language. The language which we all have to use, the language which all of us might make mistakes in. I teach English. I have taught English for 40 years. But does it mean that my English is perfect? It doesn't mean that. I'm also learning. So we all learn together. And the parables are the foundation for our learning. They are the basis for our learning because the stories are wonderful. You know, we have two concepts when we teach a story. We tell our students or our listeners that there are two concepts. This is called aesthetic. Aesthetic means appreciating the beauty, the appeal of the story. The other is didactic, that is the moral of the story. So the aesthetic dimension is the beauty of the language. The didactic dimension is the value, is the learning which we can take, the lesson which we can take from the parables. So these parables are very important because they tell us many things. They might appeal to everybody because they are very simple. The story is very simple. At the story level, if we read, it is so simple. But we can also read it at a deeper level. Let us spend some time in reading the story for these two purposes at the aesthetic, didactic level, appreciate it, check up what all we can do, because we had so many videos on self-improvement. Now, in self-improvement, improving ourselves by looking at something, by following something, by taking something as the basis is important. So for us, the basis is in the form of the book. We take the book and we take it as something which gives us multiple benefits. As we go ahead, I'm sure many of you might feel many more benefits than we are discussing here. Then we can always have a dialogue, where we can exchange ideas by saying, you did not mention this, but I have used the parable in this way. Remember that always as teachers, we wanted our students to become better than us. Always the Guru is looking for that the disciple should be better. Today, many people do not understand or recognize or know the name of Sri Ramakrishna. When we say Vivekananda, they say, oh, we know. And then we say the Guru of Vivekananda, they say, oh, very nice. Very often I remember, 175th birth anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna, many schools and colleges students had never heard of Sri Ramakrishna's name in a big city like Hyderabad. But Vivekananda's name everybody has heard. So Vivekananda, the disciple, became globally famous. But look at the excellence of the disciple. He says, every word that I speak is an echo of my master's voice. It is my master whose ideas I'm sharing. None of them are mine. If I make a mistake, it might be mine. But if I do something great, the credit is always my master's. So this is a wonderful tradition. It is a life-changing tradition globally. If we can use this tradition for our personal uses, if we can talk about this tradition with other people, we benefit a lot. Yesterday, I was speaking to somebody for 1.5 hours. That person had many conflicts. And then I said, if you believe in Sri Ramakrishna's words, if you believe in the words of Mother Sharada, then where are the conflicts? As long as we pretend to believe, we say we believe, but we actually don't believe, then conflict comes. So if we take this as the foundation, let us see what all we can make out of it. Beautiful seeds are there in it. We have to grow an entire garden out of it. That is why the tales and parables of Sri Ramakrishna will be our text, and we shall spend a lot of time talking about the various aspects of these ideas. We feel very grateful that Master Mashai, that is M or Sri Mahendranath Gupta, gave us the gospel. We feel very happy that a person like Sri Ramakrishna lived at a time which is so close to us, just separated by less than 200 years. His birth was 1836. He lived up to 1886. So when we see it, so close to us and so real, his message, so actual captured, then we say, why don't we also make use of it? When the river is flowing, everybody goes and washes. There's a beautiful saying in Hindi, that everybody is washing their hands in the Ganga. So like that, the river of knowledge, the river of excellence is flowing through these stories. All we have to do is to make the best of them. I look forward to meeting all of you again and again and sharing these ideas, because by sharing, we become enriched. If we can share with each other, then each of us benefits. We become richer. And that is why we have to share all the time. As human beings, this sharing is very important. So let us keep the tales and parables of Sri Ramakrishna with us. Let us keep this book in the forefront. And if you feel like reading, if you feel like getting the book for yourself and reading, it would be wonderful. I would be happy to, hear all your comments also. I keep requesting for your comments, because that is a wonderful way of exchanging ideas. This is not a live forum, it's a recorded forum. So you have the comments part, in the YouTube channel, where you can always put your questions, your statements, your advices. All those things are wonderful. Today, let us end by saying namaste to all of you, and Hope to meet you soon again.